get a rock star cast here. Andy and Walt, I'm gonna get to y'all at the end because they tried to cheat and they came with a little PowerPoint, they got pictures, so we're gonna put them at the end. Okay, I'm gonna ask each panelist for 2, 3, no more than 5 minutes. Let's give your own introduction about, bluntly, kind of where were you, not when the storm hit, I don't care about that, but what, I mean, it's relevant, but not that relevant. Where were you, what position did you hold, and how did you get involved in this recovery work, and what role did you serve in the recovery work? And Tim is looking at me, so I'm going to start with Mr. Coulon. Everybody in the audience has to know Tim Coulon, who served as president of Jefferson Parish for, 10 years? Served in every possible position, head of the Jefferson Parish Business Council, has been such a major volunteer and contributor to this region, to this state, and certainly to Jefferson Parish. So, Tim, what was your role then? What'd you do?
Yeah, I'm still trying to overcome your inspirational message. I don't have a law degree. I'm a recovering politician. But so, thank you, Kim. And I'm going to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, and that's the magnitude of this event. Today we're talking about New Orleans, but you mentioned St. Bernard, you mentioned Jefferson. This event impacted the whole region and the state. At the time, I was appointed by Governor Blanco as the chairman of the LCD, the Louisiana Stadium and Exposition District. Our primary mission at the time was for the commission, Doug Thornton is our leader, to renegotiate a contract with the New Orleans Saints. If you recall, if you're old enough in the audience, you know that the contract with the Saints prior to Katrina was a cash-driven contract. Every year, the amount of money they received escalated. And so that was our primary mission. Of course, along came Katrina, and our mission changed. And it might be of some interest that you're talking about a plan, and Gary talked about a plan. We soon realized that the city really didn't have much of a plan. Doug Thornton and I commissioned an engineering study of the dome and its capabilities to serve as an evacuation shelter. And for those of you who historically will remember that the dome was used twice prior to Katrina. And I would say not to any great success. So we met with the staff of the mayor and soon realized that the dome would be used in the event of a Katrina event, which was 6 weeks prior to Katrina. So from there, all hell broke loose, and you described it so aptly that it was just a monumental task. And and within a matter of a year, from August 29th to September 25th, we rebuilt the dome, an impossible task by some, and the Saints returned. And I'll go through the lineup of the heroes that I had the pleasure of dealing with. I give Governor Blanco the Courage Award. And I will tell you, despite, and we all can remember the drama, the blame game, Governor Blanco stood tall and said, I want to rebuild the dome and have the Saints return. It's a symbol of our ability to rebuild the city. And that was our challenge. And she was certainly subjected, as was Mr. Benson, to a lot of criticism for that priority in light of what was going on around the city.
Well, I want to stop you there, Tim. I'm going to let you finish, but I want to stop you there. Explain the decision-making related to that, because you have a lot of poor people suffering, and for a lot of people who actually were stuck in the dome for several days in sweltering conditions. I mean, it looked like a horror show. So bottom line is, how did you, in your role as chair of the LSCD, even justify we're going to spend that kind of money? And what kind of money did y'all spend to redo the dome?
$185 million.
Okay.
About $115 million from FEMA.
Okay.
The NFL Advisory Committee, chaired by the commissioner, put up $15 million. The state put up $13 million, I believe, in the LCD. We were able to finance $41 million, despite the fact that the state lost their bond rating. So to answer your question, I think that we met, myself, Doug, the commission, we met with Governor Blanco. We talked about the enormity of the project and and the impact on the families. She just felt so strongly that the iconic dome, the Saints was such a big symbol. You know, she always said that the city plays larger than life. You know, we're a small market, technically speaking, in the NFL, and she just felt strong enough that we could build the dome and bring the Saints back. The significance of that statement is that she, by executive order, empowered us to, overcome the typical public bid process, which all these individuals are aware of, and we were able to move forward as quickly as possible. Within a matter of days, I took a tour of the dome along with Doug and other commissioners and the state. In the meantime, I also had a chance to drive the city, and I saw the Cadillac dealership and Cadillacs all over the outside streets, and I thought we were in a movie set. I had no idea of the magnitude of the challenges they had, not only for the city, but for us to rebuild. From that point, the challenge was, not only can we rebuild the dome, do we have to rebuild a new facility?
Right.
So we brought in some experts to look at the HVAC and looked at all the facilities, took a tour, and we determined that we could rebuild the dome. And from that point on, it was a challenge. Not only was it a challenge from a perspective of materials and so forth, it was just generally, as you all know, chaos. And we had a lot of team leaders to do that. And using the word team is exaggerated, but not in this event. I'll tell you that we could go to moving on to wherever the Saints going to play.
Well, I'm gonna hold you there.
Okay.
We're gonna get to that, because that actually is an important issue for those of us who remember
Right.
all the debates going on then. So I'm gonna hold you there, hold that point, Tim. I'm gonna jump over to Alden. Again, Alden, renowned community leader, not just in the city, statewide, but he's running a bank. He's running a bank. People who need money, many of the customers were all across the country, yet you decided, Alden, well, how did you decide? Let me rephrase that as a form of a question. How did you decide, in light of what was going on in the bank, in your own neighborhood, etc., that you were going to spend that kind of volunteer time with the Bring New Orleans Back Commission, and why did you make that decision?
I didn't really make that decision. That decision was not only made for me, not only from my family, myself, but from the community itself. The community itself said that I had to be involved. And to sort of give you a little background, the bank itself and my family personally, we lost everything. We lost all of the branches, all of the facilities, 85% of our customer base relocated, and worse than that, the infrastructure that operated the bank was down, completely gone. We lost all of our equipment, lost all of our files, and it was starting all over again, right?
Wait, Alden, I need you to stop there. Explain to the audience, for a bank handling people's money and mortgages and loans, how significant it is that you lost the files. Because that's like me as a lawyer telling my client, I just lost your files. I'll try to see if I can remember it, but we're gonna see what happens. Can you kind of explain that to the audience?
Thanks for that question, but that question was hard to answer. My wife forced me to leave. I was going to stay, right? She forced me to leave. We evacuated, and we're looking at the television, and then we're looking at the flooding. And we said, okay, maybe it's not our area. We kept watching. It became our area, right? And the first thing that hit me was that, what am I going to do? Had all of these people depending on me. Customer base, community, the whole bit. And I had a friend that ran a bank in Atlanta. Went to his office, and he gave me his top staffers. He said, just use this office over here, and just tell them what you need. The first thing we have to do for the bankers in the room is understand how you get your clearance. Because we had people who evacuated that was gonna be writing checks, was gonna be using credit cards, the whole bit. And think of it this way, everybody who left, they left with nothing. They had to get money to even buy clothes, to rent an apartment, to buy the utensils for the kitchen, sheets, pillowcases, the whole bit. So the first thing we had to do was to sort of make sure that we had the bank operating. And so we literally rigged up the internet to receive our clearance from the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve lost 1 week of our clearance and didn't take responsibility for it, but that was okay, right?
He had to then, at the time, y'all.
No, right.
We had to then figure out what to do. We sent out all of our backup tapes. We had a great disaster plan, but everything unknown. So we sent 4 computer tapes out in 4 different directions. We couldn't contact 2 people who brought them with them personally. Sent to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's distribution center was knocked out. And our backup plan of having an 18-wheeler to come in without software and hardware didn't happen. We literally, I'm gonna cut it short because there's a lot.
And I'm about to cut you short, Mr. McDonald.
We literally got the word out that we were operating out of Baton Rouge. And as people came in, we wrote down on a piece of paper how much they took out, because we had no records. My grandfather at one point told me 97% of the people in the world are honest. 3% are dishonest, so make your rules for 97%, which we did. So we had people coming in, we had to give them the assurance that their money was safe, they could get money, and we didn't dare tell them that we didn't have a computer system on it. Because all of the infrastructure was knocked out. We were operating from New Orleans, so we couldn't have anything to go out or come in. So which meant even our debit cards didn't work. So we had to put a limit on the debit cards where people can get money. So long story short, we had people come in and we stood at the front door and asked them if they needed a loan. And we made loans to everybody who came in for them to at least get their life back in place. So to fast forward, we had to be a part of the rebuilding.
You had no choice. You had absolutely no choice.
All of our customers had to come back and rebuild. So we had to be part of that decision making. And I would give one important caveat here. You had talked on the racial issues. We had a group of black and white leaders who met on a monthly basis for breakfast to discuss the racial issues of the community. And this is pre-Katrina. And so because of the issues that were discussed, when Katrina came for the rebuild, everybody who was part of that breakfast realized that it was very important to have everybody involved in coming up with the plan to rebuild. Barbara Major was a community activist at the time, and Joe Canizero, Barbara Major, Joe Canizero, myself, and some others, we were all part of this breakfast group, right? So we felt that we needed to make sure the representation of the community activists, was at the table. And had Joe Canizero at the table. We had Republicans, Democrats, no together to determine the needs. We didn't worry about race, we didn't worry about money, we didn't worry about anything. What are the needs that we have to fulfill to build the city back? And it was very frightening.
And
But
Mr.
the
McDonald,
community
I'm gonna
came
hold you.
together, the community came together as a unit. Most important is, if that hadn't happened, we would not be where we
We
are.
would not be, and I'm gonna hold you to that point, because I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna go over to the superintendent, because you are in as bad or worse shape that Mr. McDonald just described the bank. In fact, didn't you have to borrow a computer?
Well, I can explain that.
Okay. But you didn't really have a whole lot,
of things and borrowed
you didn't have a whole lot of equipment, right? You had no equipment, or very little equipment, and you're trying to figure out, one, I guess, how to even convince parents to let their kids come back to school in St. Bernard, because all of your buildings are destroyed?
Yes.
Every single one of your buildings
Every
is
single
destroyed?
Mhm.
Okay, so didn't you get the schools, or at least a school, open, what, the end of September, beginning of October?
11 weeks.
11 weeks. Okay, we do want to hear some details about that. Tell us
Okay.
what happened.
Well, I am gonna start talking about where I was at the time.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sitting at my desk on a Friday afternoon, waiting for the Jamboree to open up our football season. Now, I have been 55 years now with the St. Bernard Parish Public School System. But at the time of Katrina 20 years ago, I was in my second year beginning my superintendency. And so we were all excited Friday night for the game. I got a call from OEP saying, we're gonna have a meeting tomorrow morning. I said, for what? Just like Gary was talking about the cone. Well, this storm is coming, and it looks like it's coming right at us. So what I did was I called our IT guy the very first thing, because I had a bad feeling. And I said, come in, I want you to back up every piece of data we have, all of our student data, all of our financial data, all of our accounts payable, everything that we've got, back up the data, which he did that Friday night and into Saturday. So then, of course, we were trying to evacuate all of St. Bernard Parish. And everyone in St. Bernard Parish who wanted to leave had the availability to evacuate because we supplied those buses. So we put out a call to everybody in the community. If you wanted to leave and you didn't have the transportation, the school system would supply the buses to bring you to those shelters across the state of Louisiana. So we were involved in all of that, and I had no intention of opening up a shelter at that point. But then things got very grave. We knew that there were several thousand people, about 8,000 people in St. Bernard, who had decided not to evacuate. There were some people who were very ill, people who just were not going to leave. So what we did that Sunday was open Sherman High School as a shelter. And we started out that evening with about 250 people. And those 250 people in a shelter was some of the most ill people, people who could not evacuate. We had 2 young people who were chronologically in their early 20s, but mentally as infants on ventilators to breathe. Their parents, and they came to us. We had people in the end stages of diseases. We had quite a little hospital ward, I guess you would say, with those 250 people. Well, we stayed there that night. Storm came, watched roof being blown off of the elementary school across the street. But once that passed, we thought we were kind of okay, you know, in that first round. And then all of a sudden, that next morning, we got word that there was a break in the levee in the lower ninth ward, the industrial canal. Now, water then topped the Mississippi River Gulf outlet from our north, came from the Gulf from the east. When that breach happened in the lower 9, it was coming in like a wall of water, like something I've never seen before. It came in with a vengeance. I looked out of the second floor window of Chalmette High School, saw this wall of water coming around, tossing cars like they were toys all over the place, and we had to carry all those people upstairs and try to get them to safety. At that point then, it was several days. I know you talk about the convention center here, a Superdome here and such. But we were sitting there with that time between 12 and 1,500 people as we pulled them in through the second floor windows, and no one came to us. We were rationing, we ran out of water, we ran out of food products, we were giving it to the kids, so we were waiting for that type of rescue. Well, I myself got out at some point on a crew boat up the Mississippi River, landed on the ExxonMobil dock in Baton Rouge, and then came right back in afterward. And anybody who was there, you know, we talk about boots on the ground, Kim, anybody who was there, when you came back into that, there was not a home church, school, or building in St. Bernard that was not devastated, not touched. And it was so great, and what people don't understand, a few days later, we had one of the largest oil spills in the history, land oil spills. A huge container from one of the oil refineries there, the water had pushed it slightly off. 1 million gallons of oil then spilled into the floodwaters in St. Bernard. So not only did we have flooding, we had it mixed with oil. I mean, when you came back in, you know, birds were singing. It looked like a disaster movie. You couldn't have built a more realistic set. So at that point is, what are we going to do? Now, in St. Bernard, we had 2 major oil refineries, Murphy Oil and ExxonMobil. We had Domino Sugar Refinery, one of the largest sugar refineries in the world, really, and natural gas plant. And it was imperative, I think, to the country that those would come back and up and running. So there was talk about putting barges out in the river, bringing workers back to do 24/7 rotations, living in those barges in the river, being fed. But families were looking to come back with those workers, and they were not going to come back unless we built a school, unless we had a school.
But wait, let me interrupt you, Superintendent. What did you do to convince the teachers to come back? I understand the mandate you had to try to get the schools up and open, but the teachers had all lost their homes, the administrators had lost everything. What did you say, what did you do to get them back to educate the kids, regardless of the buildings?
You know, I'm a lifelong educator, and I look at it as a vocation, not a job. I think that's the way I grew up.
It's a vocation and it's a profession, and it's a sacred one at that. My mother was a public school teacher, so
Congratulations, that's one of the
Yes.
most honorable
it
professions.
is.
Any of you people who would like to become teachers, I have certainly, I'm happy to enroll you in, or if you have children or relatives, we need good teachers. But in order to do that, you have to understand, if you were here at that time, when your whole community is wiped out, when you have something happening in your family, what do you look to first? Other members of your family. Well, they were all wiped out. Then where do you look? Maybe your church. The churches were destroyed. Your neighbors. Everything was gone. And then they were fighting with the wind versus water business,
Right.
with the insurance. They had homes destroyed that had mortgages on them, and fighting with insurance companies and such. And my teachers were the same way. So what I did, you know, at first I thought very naively that FEMA was going to come into the rescue, and so was the Army Corps of Engineers, because it was a phrase that said, mission assigned to the Corps. That sounded pretty good to me. I figured the Corps of Engineers would come in, help me get a temporary school set up, and we'd be good to go. Found out that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So then I said, well, forget it. Something I learned a long time ago, if you're going to do anything right, you do it yourself. So we took matters into our own hands. I located classroom trailers in the Carolinas, had them shipped down myself. Then we said, where are the teachers going to live if I can get them to come back?
Yep.
So we secured trailers ourselves. We didn't go through FEMA. I said, eventually y'all can pay me back for this. But I went and found them ourselves. We installed them ourselves at 1/3 of the cost that FEMA did on those little 8x29 trailers. 1/3 of the cost we did. And we put them up in the parking lots of some of our schools for our people to come in. and this is just a little side story, I don't know if I have anybody in FEMA here, but, you know, you had public assistance and individual assistance at that time, and if you were an IA, individual assistance, you had a little account with FEMA or whatever to help you individually, and then you had public assistance, public bodies had it in a different division. Well, as I brought in those trailers and brought my teachers back to live, FEMA wanted their IA numbers, their individual assistance numbers, and I refused to give it to them. I said, no, that's not for them, that's for us as the school system, because they had their families elsewhere and were dealing with those situations that they needed their own assistance for personally. So we brought in all of our employees, they came back, they stayed during the week, and some of them stayed, brought their families in those little 8x29s and put them in there. And the kids came, the first day we opened, Kim, we had 334 kids.
Wow.
And it was an unbelievable.
That is remarkable.
A few weeks later, doubled to 660, and by the end of May, 2,360 kids.
Wow.
I'm gonna ask you to hold that point. Walt and Andy, I'm gonna cheat with y'all a little bit. Bottom line is, because I want us to get to what the superintendent just discussed, what Tim discussed, what Alden discussed, what was the action? Okay, we've heard a little bit about what the experiences were, what happened that day, what happened immediately afterward, but you guys were also, I mean, Andy, you were totally on ground zero at the actual time, and Walt, you got on ground zero fairly shortly thereafter. Y'all can pull up Andy's PowerPoint. I want both of you guys to kind of talk about this and go through this a little bit. Do we have the PowerPoint? Okay. Oh, you have the PowerPoint. I'm sorry. Let's rock and roll.
Thank you, Kim. And it's just great to be on this panel with some of my business heroes like Alden, Walter, Superintendent Voitier, and Tim, just for their public service.
Yes.
And as you indicated earlier, there are literally thousands of people, individuals, family members, public employees, who put their blood, sweat, and tears into the immediate response and recovery. I was governor's chief of staff at the time. I remember getting a call from General Downer in Jackson Barracks Sunday night saying, the levees are broken, the flood waters are rising a foot every 15 minutes. There are people swimming in from the neighborhoods. So you knew long before the outfall canals had been devastated that there was just devastation. People were losing their lives as we spoke. I remember getting a call from Doug Thornton at the Superdome a few hours later saying, Andy, the roof has been ripped off of the Superdome. We're moving folks into the seats.
Yep.
Power's out, toilets are backed up. I've got Colonel Mouton here, who's an engineer and an architect. He says the structure is safe, but the wind, you could hear howling on the other side. So there were folks in the trenches keeping people safe, but also folks who were clearly scared, at risk, in that moment. And that was I was getting those messages not because I was me, I was the governor's chief of staff. I had to go tell the governor. We have people at the Ninth Ward who are losing their lives. St. Bernard Parish is about to be inundated. Long before Monday morning, we get the call from folks in Gentilly to tell us we got flooding in Gentilly, and we sent helicopters to see that the outfall canals had broken. I was playing triage for the first couple weeks after the storm. First thing the governors, asked us to do that was unusual was people are offering us money, so we set up a disaster recovery foundation. Next thing she asked me to do in a side moment, we got to set up a recovery organization. And so I had help from folks to devise the Louisiana Recovery Authority. And the key thing that
Who'd you contact for that? I mean, like, how'd y'all even come up with that? We act like saying LRA was just
a thing.
It was a
Yeah.
thing.
So-
How'd you even come up with
So
that?
there's a friend of mine, a guy named Jay Alden, who ran a charter school in New Orleans, right before Katrina, moved to London to run a system of charter schools.
Okay.
He flew back, moved into my house. First assignment was, I can't deal with this, Jay. There's people want to give us money. The government wants, and a foundation with integrity that's going to distribute the money well, help me set that up. So as a volunteer, he did that. Next week I said, Jay, she asked me to run the recovery authority, the recovery. What does that look like? He said, can I call anybody in the world and say I was calling from the governor's office of Louisiana? He calls Leon Panetta, who was a congressman, who was later Secretary of Defense and White House Chief of Staff, but he'd been involved in the recovery after an earthquake in San Francisco. He was calling everybody. He came back, and Jay had a large role in this. Got Stephen Pryor, who was running Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, Sean Riley in Baton Rouge, who became an LRA member. And I'd get briefed at midnight at my house on, here's what we're recommending. We knew we had to be bipartisan, and Governor Blanco was insistent from the days after the storm. You remember, the federal government was not on task when Katrina hit. FEMA was not on task when Katrina hit. They were not prepared.
Well, I need you to back up a little
Yes,
bit
sir.
about that, and I want all of the panelists to weigh in on this. Not only was the federal government not on task when Katrina hit, Tim, I think you might have brought this up at Saturday's dinner. The then Speaker of the House, what were his comments as it related to what the federal government could or could not do after Katrina? Walt wants to address that. He pulled his mic down so I can see he has something to say related to what Speaker Hazard said. Tell us.
I can tell you that answer real precisely because I heard it when he said it.
Okay.
And I will not, I won't say his initials were Denny Hastert. The Speaker of the House of Representatives indicated that we should not be sending money down to rebuild homes unless they're outside of the flood zones. That meant St. Bernard, Plaquemines Parish, much of New Orleans, some of Jefferson Parish, and otherwise wouldn't rebuild, and that was their position. Then I'll wait to the real question.
That's exactly what I want you to
So there was
address.
a legitimate debate in Washington about rebuilding at all.
But what I want both of y'all to do, and you can pull up your slideshow, Andy, what I want both of y'all to do, again, because I want to get to the action part. We talked about kind of everything that was going on, but tell the audience or talk about the steps that had to be taken. Well, first of all, let me back up. How much money did the state of Louisiana ultimately get from the feds? And Walt, I know you know those numbers, and Andy, I know you know them off the top of your head. How much money? Give us a figure.
A total? I think we're talking about $64 billion. I haven't seen Andy's slide.
Okay,
$68 billion.
$68 billion. Let's get to it. Let's go through, and I want anybody to weigh in. Let's talk about how the money was divvied up right here. Let's go.
So
Let's go.
the biggest single expenditure was the rebuilding of the levees. The second biggest, and this is debatable, the National Flood Insurance Program is insurance, right? We should get that money, but our Congress people had to go get it appropriated. They never had to make, an $11 billion, $13 billion allocation. We ended up with about $14 billion worth of disaster CDBG money. $10 billion of it mostly went to the road.
Explain to the audience what CDBG money. See, guys, don't
Yeah.
assume everybody knows what these acronyms are. Seriously.
It took me months to learn those letters.
Right, so community development block grants
Thank you.
are a vehicle for the government to give cities and states money. After disasters, since Katrina, but not really much before, they were giving community development block grant disaster recovery grants. No one has ever gotten $14 billion of community development, disaster block grants before Katrina. And we were able to secure that. It took 3 years and 3 separate appropriations bills, so it was not easy. That money went to the Road Home Housing Recovery Program. It went to build affordable housing. It went for economic development. It went for infrastructure. We brought Michael Heck down to run the economic development programs for the Department of Economic Development, brought this hot shot from Mayor Bloomberg's administration to New Orleans, and the rest is history. So thank you, Michael, for
Well,
making
I'm gonna
that.
stop you there. I wanna talk about road home and I wanna talk about people's homes. So that involves every single panelist, because Superintendent, you're trying to get your teachers and your families back. Tim, you're on the LRA, you're working on this. Well, you chair the housing committee. Alden's over at the bank trying to make sure the customers are able to access funds, and Andy, bluntly, you're running the whole shebang. We've heard so much about road home. What I call, I'm old school, I still used to watch Clint Eastwood movies, so I always use the analogy, the good, the bad, the ugly. Okay, so, good. One sentence, the good, the road home program. Let's go.
You want to take it? I'll take it.
Let's go.
By the way, I was asked to serve on the Louisiana Recovery Authority after Andy accosted me and tasked me, because we had met when I chaired the New Orleans Regional Chamber, tasked me to find a way to St. Bernard Parish, because you couldn't reach it by road. And so he tasked Sam Jones and Ty Vermel and I to go down the West Bank. We flagged down a pilot boat on the river, and we concocted this plan that we would acquire. We knew that there were several thousand people in the warehouse in St. Bernard Parish. I was from St. Bernard. I lost my home in St. Bernard. We didn't know much other than it was totally devastating and we didn't know. But the plan was these 5,000 people that were homeowners who were in this warehouse for several days, we had to get them out. So we basically commandeered the Algiers ferries, brought them up to the Algiers landing, and the governor and Andy had arranged to have 85 school buses sent down there. As a result of that, a couple of weeks later, I guess that, I'd never met Governor Blanco. I got a call in my car on my way back, and she says, Mr. Leger, this is Governor Blanco. I pulled over on the side, I'm afraid I was gonna lose the governor, his connection on my cell phone. She said, we're building this Louisiana Recovery Authority. It will be nonpartisan. We're gonna fight for the homeowners, and I'd like you to serve on the Louisiana Recovery Authority. Would you be interested? I said, interested. I'm a homeowner too.
How'd you become
I'll do
chair?
it 24/7.
How'd you become chair of housing?
I have no idea. I was against it. It was when she got us together the first time, there was a sheet of task forces. I was into economic development. I was one of the founders of GNO Inc. I'd been chair of the New Orleans Regional Chamber. I chaired the Economic Development Commission in St. Bernard. I wanted to do economic development, almost anything except housing. Suddenly, when she handed them out, Walter Leger Housing and Redevelopment Authority, I said, oh God, I don't know anything. Months later, though, actually, we traveled a good bit, and to get to your real question about the road home development, how it got developed, road home program, we traveled, Andy and I often together, must have testified 5, 6, 7 times to congressional committees or otherwise, to try to get this record-breaking $13.4 billion in community development block grant money. And we advocated, we fought, we argued. We got a lot of support from some members of Congress. We had opposition from others, like that guy whose initials I told
Well,
you.
let me stop you. I'm gonna stop you real quick. I want to ask that because I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I'm a congressman in Iowa, whatever, congresswoman in Iowa. I'm sitting here going, okay, people should have had some type of homeowners insurance. They should have had some type of flood insurance. They should have had something. Why should I make sure that the federal government rebuild someone's home?
Because we're Americans.
Okay.
And because part of the reason that we lost our homes was the failure of the federal levees. Part of the reason that we lost, part of the reason that we lost our homes was the failure of the federal government to provide full coverage under the National Flood Insurance Program. While it was subsidized, most of us, in fact, when you looked at we had an incredible record of how many people actually had flood insurance. When you looked at other areas and other cities that had worse flood records than us, it was pretty low. But we did our part. And why? Mainly because we're Americans. And I'll tell you, one of the last committees Andy and I testified before, a senator from Oklahoma, whose initials were Tom Coburn.
Those were his initials, Walt, okay.
Wasn't even on the committee.
He
But
came to the hearing?
specifically to the hearing to ask, and he pointed his finger at us because we were arguing that time about, we needed help, by the way, not just people from New Orleans and St. Bernard and Plaquemines Parish, but we had Hurricane Rita 3 weeks later.
Right.
Hit southwest Louisiana.
Right.
Two of the biggest, most expensive storms in the history of America.
Lake Charles
And
Couch.
most of that was wind damage.
Right.
And there were shortages to help people rebuild their homes there too. No one had ever told us this money was only for floods. So suddenly we were told, the White House said, oh, can't spend any of that money on wind, so we went to argue. And so this senator whose initials were, as I told you before, Tom Coburn, the senator from Oklahoma, specifically came there and said, I want you guys to understand, we only gave you money because of the failure of the federal levies. That's the only reason we gave you money. My response, James Carter, trial lawyer, will understand my response. I said, well, if you only want to compensate us for the negligence of the federal government, you should remove the legal immunity from suing the Corps of Engineers and let us use the tort system to get recovery for everybody in Louisiana. Then we'll get 100 cents on the dollar. We won't have to limit the recovery to $150.
Classic trial lawyer. I'm gonna let Andy speak then. I'm gonna let Andy speak then. I'm gonna go to Mr. McDonald because I'm gonna ask him a question about valuation related to the houses. So Andy?
Yeah, so I think the key point was there was no automatic homeowner recovery, housing recovery program funded by Congress.
Had never been.
Had never been.
Had never been. That's important to know.
And President Bush came to Jackson Square, and he gave that great quote that you just started with, Kim. He also said, we're gonna do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to rebuild this great city and this great state. So in December of 2005, Congress first passed some discretionary funding bills. They passed a cap of $5 billion for Mississippi, and we could get the rest based upon damage. So we got $6 billion of CDBG. Mississippi got 5. Any measure of need or damage, we were 10 to 1 what Mississippi had.
I was
Schools
just about to ask you to give the
economic
percentages.
damages, houses damaged, jobs lost, whatever it was 10x that they had. One of Governor Blanco's appointees to the Louisiana Recovery Authority is a prominent Republican named Boise Bollinger. Boise was a great advocate for us. He says, I'm getting mad at Thad Cochran, who's the senator from Mississippi, chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, for getting Mississippi all that money. Just get your fair share. Like, the fact is he was getting $5 billion because he was chair.
That's right.
And we said, how come people across one side of the Pearl River, American citizens who lost their house in Mississippi, should get so much more than American citizens who lost their house in Louisiana, on the other side of the Pearl River? That ain't right. We went to the White House. Governor Blanco did a press conference one day outside, said, I'm declaring war on the White House until we get this money. She goes, they understand war, because we're in the middle of a war with Iraq. The president, to his credit, said, we'll give you what you need, and they appropriated another $4 billion to make up for that inequity. But it still wasn't enough, right? And so in the fall of 2006, Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House, and she wanted to do what she thought was necessary to get a full funded recovery. And in the fall of 2007, pushed by Senator Landrieu in the Senate, Speaker Pelosi and our delegation and others in the House, we had another big appropriation that was kind of the result of one of Walter and my testimony before the Congress. At that point, the Bush administration said, we've given you enough. And on the wind versus water, we said, hold on. You said as much as we needed for as long as we needed it. And they didn't say, except if you had wind damage, right? And they came back and the Congress gave us the money. 3 appropriations bills gave us the commitments: rebuild the levees, rebuild the housing, rebuild the infrastructure, fund the public assistance program that funds the school boards. that got us to the $68 billion. That was all done by October and November of
But
2007.
I'm gonna change the conversation a little bit. What, I know you wanna speak, I know you wanna speak, but I wanna get to Mr. McDonald, then I wanna get to Tim, then I'm gonna come back. I want,
I like the conversation. Keep
you
going.
know, we're rocking and rolling. Walt, Andy, and Mr. McDonald, I want you to talk about, though, this issue related to how we decided, and I said we, because we were all on the LRA. So how we decided, or how a decision was made, let me modify that, related to the valuation that homeowners would get. And Mr. McDonald, you and I have had a couple of conversations about that as recently as Saturday. So I'd like you to start, sir.
All right, thank you very much on that. I'd like the audience to really understand the difficulty, first of all, in getting the money, which wasn't enough. So then somebody had to come up with a formula for distribution. So everybody on deck, LRA, Bring Back New Orleans Commission, community leaders, a number of us got together at the Sheraton Hotel, and we locked ourselves up in the room for almost a week, because the formula was the most important piece. Because there was a cap on the formula for $150,000 plus what you got from the insurance company. All of it was based on appraisals. So a home in the 9th Ward was only gonna appraise for $70,000 or $80,000, but it was gonna cost $150,000 to rebuild, whether you built it in the 9th Ward, whether you built it on St. Charles Avenue, right? So there was an automatic shortfall for a lot of people in the community. And the committee then began talking about how do we rebuild in the jack-o'-lantern approach. And that's why we see some of the devastation today still not rebuilt. Now, everybody tried to do their best in coming up with something. And
No, I got you next one.
so that's a lesson learned for any other disasters. But that was the best solution at the time.
Well,
Well, take
it wasn't
Alden's
the
point
best
further,
solution.
the
It was
lesson
the
learned,
solution-
Walt.
It was the solution that was crammed down on us from HUD.
That's what I wanted you to discuss.
And
Explain
with
that
all
to
due
the
respect,
audience.
Don Powell, the president's czar, recovery
Czar, recovery
who
czar.
was great and very helpful and supportive of us, but he was a banker. And he thought of evaluations in terms of appraisals and values. So the initial, without getting in the weeds, you really don't want to hear this formula argument. And without getting in the weeds, we had to start from pre-storm value, not actually cost of replacement. But actually, Andy and our staff and my committee, we had a committee that was pretty aggressive. We invited onto the committee people who were critics of the program. We had contractors, we had architects, we had hearings. Andy and his staff, we were on the radio several times a week hearing from homeowners' complaints, and we launched this ship while it was still under construction. You know, there had been, Andy said the other night, no playbook. We were created, but the plan that we originally offered, Ms. McDonald, was we were gonna, you had to do all of the, you know, insurance, et cetera, and then the grant, and then the plan was that the banks would administer the program and pay out as you, because
Right,
the
pay out
governor
as
said
you
we want to
make
rebuild,
repairs.
we don't want to just give people
Right.
money, this is a big rebuilding program. And the banks would administer basically stage payments, and this was a key thing, that would be a forgivable, affordable loan. Well, on March 7, 2007, a day that will live in infamy, HUD suddenly, after approving everything we were doing, said, never mind. And said, you gotta just start paying money. We lost the affordable loans, we lost the control and the administration of the banks.
Yeah, all of the bankers in the community came together
Yep,
and argued with Don Powell.
Absolutely.
important.
And so when we say the whole community came together, it wasn't one soul left in the community that did not participate in the
But
recovery.
one thing left, even after that, we were pretty upset. I was sent to Washington, I was not on a payroll, I was a volunteer, so it was okay for me to yell and scream at HUD.
And he did.
And
In case
the
it's
employees
Oh, I
had to
think
be
it's okay
polite
for
and
you to
diplomatic.
yell and scream, period,
Not at
so.
all. But we also, even after that, in the program, which wasn't as good as the initial design, we created additional compensation grants for low-income people. For that person who had a $70,000 valuation, but it was gonna cost more, you could get up to $50,000 additional if you were low income. And later, that cap was even lifted. And so we did everything we
And
could.
Andy's biting at the bit
This-
there,
yeah,
change
I just
topics, and
wanna-
then I'm gonna get to
I
Mr.
just wanna
Coulon.
make, this is an important point, right? So, when Alden notes the pre-storm value that HUD crammed down on us, that baked in housing inequity, right?
Absolutely.
The additional compensation
No,
grant.
stop there.
Yeah.
Stop there. Because again, we're talking real fast, because I'm gonna get through, but I need you to be clear to the audience how and why that baked in housing inequity. Mr. McDonald hit on it a little bit, but I wanna make sure people understand that.
It's called redlining. And we had redlining
Thank
in
you.
America. It was authorized by our
Thank
federal
you.
government and the housing agency. And that caused the inability of black homeowners to build and buy houses in white neighborhoods. And there was a built-in lower valuation to black neighborhoods all across this country and in New Orleans than there was in white neighborhoods. And that still existed in 2005,
Yes.
August 29 of Katrina. And so if you were capped at pre-storm value, then you might get less money towards that 150,000. The additional compensation grant, Kim, was designed intentionally. It was part of the initial part of the program, and it allowed low to moderate income homeowners to get extra money towards the cost of repairs, which lifted low to moderate income homeowners up to the $150,000 cap in the most devastated areas across the board. It didn't solve it for
Didn't
folks
solve
in
it
the middle
completely,
class.
but it addressed
but it
the issue.
did
Well,
address-
I'm gonna let you say one more point, then I'm moving on.
One
Moving
more
on.
issue there, and just to show you how absurd the whole thing was and how new it was. Not that HUD was trying to
No.
hurt anybody, but they considered they would not send any money except for the valuation of the home itself, without doing an evaluation of
Related to
of
the
real
land.
estate. And we fought with them.
Right.
We act and
And
finally.
you got that change.
We got that.
You got that change.
That was a lot of little yelling and screaming, and so that pumped it up a little bit, plus the additional compensation. But wait, with all of that though,
Wait.
the average grant, and you'll see on there, the average grant statewide was about $69,000.
Exactly, it was.
In New Orleans,
It was
because of
higher.
the additional compensation grant and otherwise, it was $95,000. In St. Bernard, it was $88,000, because we also had low to moderate.
And that's significant to know.
So
I'm
we
not
actually
letting you
got
speak
more
again
money.
right now, Andy. I'm jumping to Mr. Coulon, because I want to jump to something else. We're about to start football season. So everybody in this room better be a Saints fan. Everybody in this room should be a Saints fan. You're dealing with, okay, these guys are putting together the homeowners program. The superintendent is trying to get our kids educated. She's bringing people back. Mr. McDonald's trying to get money out the door into homeowners, into people who've lost everything, giving them loans, making sure that we're rocking and rolling. You, in addition to trying to fix the Superdome for, what did you say, 155 million?
I think initially 185.
185 million, you also had to deal with an issue that a lot of people forget about unless they have gray or purple hair like me, that at one point, the owner of the Saints seemed to be pretty strident about the Saints no longer being the New Orleans Saints. Can you tell the audience, Tim, a little bit about that?
Sure. We quickly, and there's no comparison to the challenges we all faced. In my capacity at the LRA, once we appropriated the money, spending the money was challenging and playing by the rules. And Doris brought up the FEMA rules and the betterments and so forth. But to your point, September 2nd, the Saints packed up all their gear and went to San Antonio. It was well documented that they would prefer to stay in San Antonio. The challenges brings up my next hero. My next hero is Sean O'Keefe. We met in the Cook Center, and my wife remembers
Wait,
that
tell them
day.
who Sean O'Keefe is.
Sean O'Keefe, the chancellor at LSU at
Yep.
the time. We met at the Cook Center at LSU. My wife sitting outside the building and outside the office, I should say, and heard lots of volume, lots of rhetoric, lots of rhetoric. The commissioner was there, Mr. Benson was there, the governor was there, the chancellor was there, several of us from the LSCD, and Mr. Benson made in no uncertain terms that he was not happy about considering playing at LSU. And I will tell you, Chancellor O'Keefe, the commissioner, stepped up. And the commissioner, if you remember him, a tall, very, very appealing guy.
And he was a lawyer, wasn't he? He was a
Right,
corporate
he was a
attorney,
lawyer.
right?
And basically said, Mr. Benson, we're gonna play some games here at LSU. The chancellor knew that it was a challenge to play NFL football in College Stadium. But all that came together that day, that we had a split schedule between San Antonio and LSU. And of course, the LSU games, again, received a lot of press, not positive press, but that kind of led us into where the Saints continued to navigate and look for reasons not to be in New Orleans. And of course, they challenged the use of the practice facility in Metairie, alleging that the National Guard, it was destroyed. That led to another meeting where finally in December, the NFL leadership, the players' union representative, we took a tour of New Orleans and Metairie and wound up in the Metairie facility to see a facility that was ready to be used. So within a matter of weeks, the Saints were moved to the Metairie facility for training. But in the meantime, the Saints navigated through the legal process of trying to find a way to get out the deal. And again, there's where the commissioner formed the NFL Advisory Committee of Ownership, who was certainly friendly to the commissioner. The NFL decided they would stay. The commissioner put a commitment on the Saints to, you're staying in town, put a commitment on us at the LSCD and the state that we were gonna play the opening game of the September 2006 season.
Yes.
So my next hero is Doug Thornton and his
Yep.
staff. Doug was, throughout the whole process, was on the ground, whether or not it was negotiating and talking with the Saints, as was implementing the plan. Then we go to the design team, which Billy Seisler was one of them. Trey Trahan, the architectural design team, was incredible. Equally incredible, though, was Broadmoor Construction. And I use this as a sidebar. If you remember what the condition of the roof was, we had the roofer come into town to see the original roofer who did the original dome, his family. He came in and said, I'm gonna rebuild that roof in 6 months. 6 months. The largest roof, as we know,
Yep.
in the United States.
Yep.
That all happened. And then everything started falling into place. We managed to do in tranches. We managed to take advantage of the governor's executive order. And I lead to Mr. Benson. He is a hero in many respects. He was a businessman, like you talked about the number of businessmen, worried about not only about the team, but the players, about the city,
Yep.
and whether we were in a position to have a Saints.
Could we sustain a football team
Right.
at that point?
So once he came forward and was very supportive, then, of course, we know September 25th, the day that my wife and I walked around Pointer Street, the governor sponsored a lunch to every worker. And I will tell you, every worker who worked in that facility was passionate, not because they were making a day's pay, but they wanted to see, they saw what the city was like. They saw the suffering that was going on. And we looked at the dome, as I said in the beginning, as an icon, the return of the Saints, bringing all the races together, cheering for the
Right.
Saints, not for Democrats or Republicans. And my wife and I walked, and my whole family who's here today, we went down Pointer Street, and it was euphoria. It was Mardi Gras. So that whole day, and of course, you couldn't have a better ending in a win. So I'll turn it over to Walt now.
No. I'm running the panel. Nice try. No, because I'm changing the topic before we get to some audience questions. I'm gonna start with you, and I need y'all to listen to my instructions. I need a 1-2 sentence max, like not a 100-word sentence, 2 sentence max of what I'm about to ask you.
Start with ball.
Okay, no, I'm not starting with ball. I'm not starting with ball. The question is, because again, you guys did a phenomenal job doing all of this. But part of what GNO Inc. is trying to do with today is, what is our blueprint? What do we tell other communities that, God forbid, if something horrible like this occurs, what do we tell them what they need to do to move forward? So Tim, since you're talking, 2 sentences, I know you're a recovering politician, 2 sentences. If you're dealing with it from something like the sports angle, what do you tell the mayor of that city that's been hit by a tragedy? What do you tell the business leaders about the import of their sports team, whether it's baseball, whether it's basketball, whether it's football? What do you tell them they need to do to fight to make sure that you continue to move forward, and why? 2 sentences.
First of all, you can't overplan. You cannot overplan. That's one thing. You have to prepare for disasters throughout the United States that we're all experiencing. Number 2, you have to have a backup to, we all experience that, and I think that from the Saints and the Dome's perspective, I think they're aware that the Dome is not a suitable facility for an evacuation shelter.
Okay, that is great advice, Tim. Now, Superintendent, I mean, love the way that you were navigating and doing everything. You're kind of operating all outside the zone. You're not even in the federal government zone. You're doing your own thing. You're operating outside the zone. So if you're talking to the superintendent, or whatever the terms are across the country, of a school district that's been somehow devastated by whatever tragedy, and you've got to bring these kids back. You've got to bring their parents back. 1-2 sentences. We're going to follow Tim. He did well. Follow my instructions. What are you telling your comparator? What are you telling them?
Well, you have to be cognizant of the federal rules, regulations, or whatever.
Yep.
Take matters into your own hands. You've got to do it yourself. You have to have a plan in place, but you have to move forward. You can't stop and wait. You stop and wait, you lose the moment, and you lose. You may win a little battle, but you lose the war.
Okay, great advice. I'm going to jump. Well, I'm getting to you. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise.
I can speak in run-on sentences.
I'm going to cut you off, but keep going. We're going to go right down the line. Go ahead.
My answer is very simple.
Please.
Because Governor Blanco put in place a lot of non-politicians.
Yes.
The politicians and political leaders do not worry about politics. Do not worry about your own political futures. Do not worry about making the right political decision. Put together the numbers, the quantifications, the experts, et cetera, and do what's right, and let the chips fall where they may. And the politics will either fall in line or it won't, but you have to do what's right.
And I know another word you would want to use is the transparency of the process, correct?
I have it written down.
I know you did. I know you did. The transparency of the process.
Public, and yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
That
now,
was three sentences.
that you did great, Walt. Okay, now Andy, you and the superintendent were kind of in similar positions because y'all actually had a job. Like, you are in the middle of being chief of staff for the governor, the superintendent's running the school system when this worked, versus, volunteer. So what do you tell your counterpart from a job standpoint at the highest level of government? What's the blueprint? How do we get this done? How do we move it forward? How do we interact with DC? 3 sentences.
You changed the question.
I gave you an extra sentence. Come on. I gave you an extra sentence.
So, look, thank you. So the secret to our success, as you indicated, we had Norman Francis as our chairman, unimpeachable. Governor Blanco asked him once, he said no. She asked him twice, he said no. I was staff people. I was trying to get an alternative. She said, I have to have Norman Francis. The other thing she said I had to have was a bipartisan group. We're not fighting for anything but Louisiana's future, and that's what we're gonna do. And so if you're gonna have a recovery that's credible, you've gotta have the community coming together in a nonpartisan way with citizen leaders like these advocating for your community.
Excellent, right on point. Mr. McDonald, 3 sentences. You're gonna end it. Now, you're serving in a volunteer role for the city of New Orleans, but you're a banker. I mean, you're trying to make sure your bank stays open, but more importantly, you're trying to make sure that your customers can have some relief before they start getting any FEMA grants or anything like that. So what do you tell your counterparts from a business standpoint as well as from a volunteer activist standpoint? What's the blueprint? What do you do? 3 sentences, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, one sentence.
No run on.
One sentence is everything everybody else has said.
Yep. Yep.
That's number one.
Agreed.
Number 2, you have to have a plan that includes everyone. You have to listen to everyone's challenge. And number 3, you have to think out of the box.
Yes.
We, at our company, we say, whenever you run across an obstacle, O for obstacle also means O for opportunity. And that's what we did. We had to think out of the box. We had to think creatively as to how to get this done. And to the point that was made earlier, you have to move quickly.
Awesome. Okay, now I think we have a few minutes. Matt? 20, wow, we have a lot of time for audience questions. I know you guys have got to have some questions as a follow-up to these experts, what they said, what they did, what the blueprint is. Anybody? Yes, ma'am. And can you say your name, ma'am?
Can I get you to come down to the microphone so everyone can hear?
Can you run the mic?
Yeah, we can break it. I know you guys can hear me because I have a big mouth.
Do the Phil Donahue.
So Helen, Tom
Remember that, right?
when was General Honore brought in and to take charge?
Everybody loves General Honore.
I
We just
know.
saw him Saturday.
Okay.
He's the best.
General Honore self-deployed.
Yes, he said that. No, he said that Saturday. He said that.
This wasn't his territory, but he
Right.
saw Americans in need,
Yeah.
and he self-deployed. He arrived on Wednesday. But what I want to say, just to you all here, is a representative of the state of Louisiana, the Adjutant General of the National Guard brought in all of the other National Guards. They reported through that chain of command. The first responders, the police and fire of all of our parish, the sheriff's office, those folks were largely the boots on the ground responsible for evacuating the dome and evacuating the convention center long before additional federal assets arrived on the ground. And so I was surprised, Gary, when you said that Don Rumsfeld called you up, because there's a book by a guy named Chris Cooper on the post-Katrina disaster, where despite President Bush's orders for his government to lean forward, Don Rumsfeld was worried about a war in the Middle East.
Yep.
And he was slow walking the dispatch of the 82nd Airborne to New Orleans. They've documented that in that book. So the first responders locally, the National Guardsmen who came in from elsewhere, they got the folks out of the dome, they moved the folks out of the convention center. Then the U.S. military showed up. General Honore was a great leader in that, but he didn't have any troops to back him up until a couple days later.
That's a great question because we love General Honore. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How
Can
you
say your
doing?
name?
Kimberly Thomas.
I love your name already.
Thank you. I formerly worked for both Ghost Up and the Road Home. My question is a two-part question. Some of the things that you all tackled was unprecedented. How close do you think we are to having those type of protocols as policies or anything like that to prepare us? And are we better prepared for a storm of that magnitude, given the prior history, everything that you all have gone through? Do you feel like current administrations are properly prepared in 2025?
Well, since nobody wants to
Yeah,
take
your
a shot at that,
panelists are looking at you, Walt.
the current administration has indicated they wanted to do away with FEMA. I say change the name. We had a lot of trouble with FEMA, but FEMA has improved significantly, I think. A lot of people that gained expertise here in Katrina have gone on to work for FEMA, and there needs to be adjustments in FEMA, but there needs to be a national response. Maybe Texas can handle a big storm. Small states like Louisiana, poor states, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, we need help of our American brothers and sisters. And that response is important. Another fact is the problems we had in Road Home, that HUD jammed down our throats, they've been fixed. They will never use pre-storm value again. So that's recovered. But response and otherwise, I think you have to look for experts. I think you should have personally regional development of experts and otherwise. I think we learned those lessons. I think those lessons are there. I would sure like to see some reform of FEMA, but we can't do away with it on a national basis.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Walt, because I'm going to ask my own questions. I'm going to interrupt right now. You said something earlier that we're all Americans, so that's what we do. So this really is a debate right now. This isn't something Kim is coming up with. There is a national debate about whether the federal government has an obligation, whether it's a legal obligation, a moral obligation, a fairness obligation, to come in, regardless of whether it's called FEMA, this, that, and the other. That's irrelevant. Does it have an obligation, or should it have an obligation in 2025, after all of this has occurred, to come in a community, whether it's Texas, California, or Arkansas? Start with you, because you're the one that said it. I'm going to ask each panelist.
There's a legal principle called posse comitatus,
Right.
which means the military does not come in locally unless the governor asks for it. That seems to be forgotten a little bit
nice
these
try
days in
with that.
some other area. But when the governor asks for it, then we should, that's what our country, we're a democratic republic.
Yep.
When the governor asks for help, generally presidents have responded and should do that. If the governor doesn't need help, it's a small enough event, and then fine. I would think you have to be flexible, but we needed the federal government. I would add there too, in St. Bernard Parish, the first responders, the sheriff's department, the firemen who stayed there, the school people that stayed there, they brought those 5,000 people to that, after the storm. So the locals are the first on the scene, but you need the feds.
But I'm going to ask Tim and the rest of the panelists to answer a different question, or a slightly different question. I understand what you answered related to, the military boots on the ground coming in to help. I'm actually talking about from a financial standpoint. So, and I'm going to ask each and every one of you, yes, no, and explain it if you will, should or
Yes.
does?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Superintendent?
legally, morally, and every which way you want to do. We're all Americans, and there has to be a separation for emergency services and then ongoing recovery.
Yep.
And these people providing the emergency services should be empowered to do it. And what he talked about earlier about politics, forget the politics, get the job done.
Perfect. Walt, I know your answer is yes, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald, yes. Andy?
Absolutely, yes.
Boots on the ground.
And FEMA has dramatically improved their response.
Right.
What they have not done that needs to be reformed is improve their recovery. Senator Landry passed a law that we could do a single settlement for our schools. We got $1.8 billion, and we could decide which ones to rebuild, which ones to repair, which ones to knock down, and where. That's the way FEMA ought to work on recovery, not making the superintendent count every pencil, eraser, chalkboard, so we can replace every pencil, chalkboard, and eraser in that school.
Before she got that settlement, we had it.
You did it.
We
Well,
did it.
You forced it.
Superintendent, you were forcing it and you rocked and rolled. I think we have a question in the back, Matt, and can you say your name, please? I can't see, sir.
Reverend Willie L. Calhoun Jr.
Yes, sir.
My
Robert.
question is about the firing of the 7,500 teachers that was only done in Orleans Parish. I'd like to know who and why that decision was made.
I don't know if this group can necessarily answer that, sir, because
Can
none
we
of,
have an answer back here potentially?
okay, I'm sorry. Who's back there to
Hi,
answer?
Leslie Jacobs, I'm on the next.
Oh, okay.
Former member of the Orleans Parish School Board and a member of BESC. The Orleans Parish School Board in July was going for a $50 million line of credit from the bond commission because they were out of cash. When the levees broke, they could not get that line of credit, and Torrance Sanders, then president of the board, in September, through Vincent Sylvain's blog, notified that they would be terminating all employees with emergency leave, no severance. So the reason Jefferson Parish could pay is they had a fund balance. St. Bernard had a fund balance. Orleans had no money. Then teachers lost their jobs because schools did not open until January. We had 65,000 students projected in August of 2005. By May of 2006, we were up to 12,000 students. As the schools reopened, all veteran educators staffed them, those that were in town. It wasn't until 2007 we had real return of kids. Again, those years blurred, just like they blurred during COVID. We had 30,000 kids show up, and we didn't have teachers because we still didn't have housing. And working with the Blanco administration and Senator Landrieu, we went to the federal government to get emergency money, about $250 million, to pay for teacher housing. It is in 2007 that we went to Teach for America and begged them to come into town because we had no teachers, and those young people would go into trailers or apartments and didn't have families to care about. So that is actually what happened. Teachers lost their jobs just like tens of thousands of other people lost their jobs. In New Orleans, it took it years to really reopen. New Orleans East didn't get their fully back until, I think it was fall of 2006.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the question. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. One more question. Sir, Matt, maybe two more. You identified someone in this gentleman here in the hat also.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I can see that's Wayne Connor. Is
Yeah,
that
Wayne Connor here. You guys talked a lot about what it took to work together, about the American values that you all saw in each other, and how to work in a nonpartisan manner for the state of Louisiana, for the citizens here who were victims of this tragedy. The political climate, I think, today is much different than it was then. Tell the audience what you guys think is necessary today to have those same similar partnerships for us to all work together about the common need that people have, as opposed to the political aspirations that others may have or needs that they have for their own selfish desire.
Great question, Wayne. Who wants to tackle that one? Jump on there. Jump on there. Tim, recovering politician, jump in.
No, I asked that very question just recently at a luncheon. What would be our experience today with the leadership we have in place if we had a Katrina or a similar event? And I don't know that I would give it high marks, but I think that disasters bring people together. I think we put aside our political differences, and I would hope that that would be the answer. Going back to Mr. McDonald, the banks were not open. Mr. Hudson, I sat on the Omni Bank Board. The first order of business was to get the banks open. Jefferson Parish opened their schools, not as quickly as you, but my wife came in. I lived in Baton Rouge, she taught school. I like to think I'm a glass half full guy. And I like to think that tragedies, disasters like this bring us to unite us. And I do have some concerns that we're not prepared to deal with what it would take to have another, God bless we never have another Katrina, but I have some concerns, and we all have concerns probably on, and how do we deal with that? We communicate, communicate, talk to each other, not send emails all the time. We have to have the
You have
discussion.
to have a conversation. And you referenced Mr. McDonald, so Mr. McDonald, how would you respond?
Well, I'm gonna respond from my personal observation. And I think in order to get solutions done in a quickly manner you have to have people to design the agenda. Politicians get in the way, whether it's today or whether it was back during Katrina days. They get in the way and they make political decisions. All of our problems exist today because of political decisions being made and not the need of the community.
Correct.
So we have to begin understanding that every day in our future. We have to then begin holding politicians accountable, opposed to politicians telling us what they want.
That's perfect.
Michael Willis.
Is that Mr. Willis?
Yeah. So I'm an Algerian in the West Bank, and you know, we revitalized, we was back running faster than everybody else. And I was kind of blessed because I had a business on the West Bank. But for some reason, I keep seeing a lot of money gets spent in New Orleans. And they keep acting like this certain part of New Orleans, which is called Algiers. We never hear anything about funding. And we still don't get any funding. And no matter what disaster happens, what happens in New Orleans, Algiers, West Bank, New Orleans never is talked about. Super Bowl money, no Algiers. You know what I'm saying? Like, so how do y'all figure out how to disperse money to New Orleans when disasters happen?
Well, I'm gonna jump in for real quick before I turn it over to these guys. Your question is a great question in broad form. It's nice to see you, Mr. Willis. Thanks for coming today. But bottom line is, to a large degree, on this particular tragedy, meaning the August 29th, 2005 Katrina tragedy, Algiers actually had less damage. It did not have the same level of flood damage. That's not even debatable. It had wind damage. There was definitely wind damage to a lot of the homes, but I remember driving in, 1 week, 2 weeks afterward, and having to stay with one of my friends who lived in Algiers, who had lights and everything else. So your point is well taken in a broad sense of whether or not Algiers is getting its fair share. From a Katrina standpoint, Algiers was not hit like New Orleans, it was not hit like St. Bernard, and it wasn't hit like some of the portions of Jefferson Parish. I'm gonna let Walt and Andy have the last word, then we're gonna take a break and get ready for the next panel.
So we have a street called Crash.
Sir, excuse me, Mr. Willis, I appreciate that. We really do have to give other people an opportunity, but thank you, sir.
One of the first of the 5 schools that was built after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans was L.B. Landry High School, $54 million building on the West Bank in that neighborhood that wasn't flooded by Katrina. So I think there was opportunities where we have made those investments. There's certainly lots more that we need to do as a city, so I agree with you.
And this would be a broader answer to that question. And one of the things, I think the genius of Kathleen Blanco was that she put together the Louisiana Recovery Authority of no politicians. And the legislature had to approve us, appoint us, approve what we did. They weren't happy about it. The politicians, the elected officials, they thought we're elected people, we should be making the decisions, not you guys. Governor Blanco's thought was, we are going to rebuild based on actual needs of damage, not politics. Not who's got the most influential politician, who's got the biggest population. Little St. Bernard Parish was totally devastated. You're gonna be taken care of even if your politicians weren't as strong. And to me, that's the point that you were making, Kim. So if there was no damage, you didn't get any money. If there was little damage, you got a little bit less. And that was the end of it. I'd like to close by a little quote, a sentence from Kathleen Blanco, if you don't mind.
Well, I'll let you close for you, and then I'll close. Attorneys always fight with each other. He's plaintiff's attorney, I'm a defense. Sir?
I will, no. Because Kathleen Blanco became a hero to me. I didn't know her before. Spent a lot of time, actually, after we were in Washington testifying, we would meet in the evenings where she was hustling money, I was testifying, and we would drink martinis. She could sock away her martinis. And she was a wonderful human being. But she said in a speech she gave to us, Andy, she said, in the not too distant future, I predict the sounds of hammers and saws will be ringing through all of our communities as our homes are rebuilt. And not long after that, we will hear the voices of children returning to our neighborhoods. That will be a great day for Louisiana.
That
We've
is a
seen that
wonderful
day.
way to end. These men and women gave up their time, blood, sweat, and tears to bring this community back, and we all owe them a debt of gratitude. Tim Coulon, Superintendent Doris, Alden, McDonald, and I'd like to end with a quote from Dr. King. I'd like to end with a quote from Dr. King because this applies to everybody in this room. This is in 1968, shortly before he was assassinated. He said, "Let us rise tonight with a greater readiness, let us stand with a greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be." We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. All of us in this room have an opportunity to make this community better, this city better, this state better, this region better, and this country better. Let's all do that. Thank you for coming today.